are you?
Hi, Suhoon. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm in Penang celebrating Chinese New Year, and it's the year of the snake. So it's supposed to be like a slow, slithery year. But what's happening in our world in travel tech is definitely not slow or slithery. It's like so rapid. Last few days, around AI and the emergence of DeepSeek, coming out from supposedly nowhere. What do you think? What do you make of all this that's happening in AI and how it will impact our travel tech industry?
There's been an assumption up to literally 1 month ago. Well, actually, DeepSeek really came out in December. That's when people in the AI field started to notice about it. And it's only really hit mainstream news in the last few weeks. But I think the big assumption up to now is that, China's only ever produced copies of things, and evolved existing things. And you could argue that that's what's happened here with DeepSeek as well, but not really. And if I kind of pause, I always look at the US view of China has always been assuming that the US is leading on everything, and it is in many regards. Nvidia, GPU, the relationship with Taiwan, TSMC. Definitely, China has been quite far behind on that, but as it turns out, that this whole pyramid, or whatever you want to call it, stack of shelves that AI is now, it's big GPU, big powerful processing, which is unique to USA and TSMC because that's what AI needs. Needs gigantic amounts of GPU to train models. All of this was impossible to replicate, and OpenAI and Claude, Anthropic, and so on, having a wall of capital to keep them ahead, and China and the rest of the world being far behind. But what happened with DeepSeek is, turns out, you can train a model for in a different way and use 1/10, arguably less, of the GPU and of the power, which kind of rendered the USA's embargo or restrictions on GPU to China kind of meaningless. And take all of that aside. So the geopolitical kind of AI race, and it's only United States, is over now, and it's China has every right to claim AI sovereignty and kind of AI leadership. But on top of that, it's this question of open models versus closed models. So OpenAI, ironically, being the closed model, a proprietary, try to monopolize, try to do regulatory capture to prevent anyone else from getting there, use the law once they're ahead of everyone else. That argument of that versus the open model, the Llama model, where the weights are open, and you can run your own models locally on your MacBook. Pretty clear that China has undermined, those the closed companies by open sourcing the DeepSeek model. And what does that really mean? What it means is that inference, or runtime use of large language models that the travel industry would use, getting into our world now, the cost of using compute, of processing large language models to run your chatbot or to run your hotel search engine, all those things, it just overnight got reduced to about 5% of what we were all expecting it to be. And there would have been cost would have been a factor when you're thinking about the viability of certain business models that deploy AI as a foundational part of your tech. Not existing companies like Booking or any of those guys that are just going to add AI in the top of an existing stack, but startups and earlier stage companies that are really purely AI may not have been financially viable up until DeepSeek kind of revealed that, look, there's O1 capable models that are just as good as anything that's out there now, and you can run them locally on your own servers and cost you peanuts, and already the cost is going from say $5 to 20 cents for the same thing. And so we definitely see like, irrespective of whether DeepSeek is lying about how they train the model, that they rip off OpenAI, all that stuff doesn't really matter. because at the end of the day, what they've established is that open source models, open models, I would say, uh, will win the day. And so that means the big winners are Amazon, Microsoft, those guys that simply sell compute at scale and sell LMs at scale. And the secondary, and they're horizontal, the secondary winners are every startup in the world that suddenly AI is now literally, it's an inconsequential cost of using AI to power things. So, like, I know that's 100 miles an hour
Yeah.
summary of where we are, but it's a great place. It is a great time uh, for everyone. Yeah.
So yeah, I think regardless of the politics, and I don't want to get into the political debate whether you feel I think what DeepSeek has done is really challenge a lot of assumptions, and really made people rethink, that what people took for granted, and in many ways, I mean, I've been exchanging messages with my friends in China as well as in the US as well, and I think one of the things is that we are so exposed to
Yeah.
Western media, and Western media is so open about what they tell us. I mean, like, there's so much information out there, whereas we don't really know what's been happening in China under the hood for the last 3 years, right? So this has challenged assumptions. So regardless of it, it's a it's definitely a game changer, right? In how it will impact our industry, as you say,
Yeah.
like lower the cost. But I found one of your comments that you sent to me really interesting, and I wanted to get you to unpack that a little bit. Where you say, if your mind isn't open to the power of all these AI systems, whether it's DeepSeek or ChatGPT or Claude or
Yeah.
Perplexity, that is the end of it. And you said you have to believe that AI will fundamentally change how you work as a
Yeah.
starting point, and that belief needs to be force fed by the leadership of the
Yeah.
organization. So tell me why you think that that is so important
Well,
right
look,
now.
it comes to human behavior. There's a famous book, "Who Moved My Cheese?" For those that don't know it, people are often, comfortable where they are and reluctant to change until forced to change. That's the first part of it. Innovators aren't, but the general are. And if you're running a company with 1,000 people or 100 people or whatever it is, it's going to be difficult to really move the cheese. And the cheese here is obviously AI as a tool to get work done rather than programmers or designers, whatever. And the point of it is, AI is very clearly as big a transition as the mainframe to the desktop computer was. But if you look back at those days, there were still a lot of companies that happily stayed on mainframes with experts in COBOL and everything, and ultimately it took decades or generations for them to go out of existence. But in the modern world now, it doesn't take long to disrupt an industry and to effectively wrestle leadership position with using technology. And so if you're an established company that isn't 100% pivoting to AI, even in a faster way than companies pivoted to mobile. I mean, if you remember travel, right? Travel was all desktop, and finally, feels like 800 years it took to move to mobile, but we are predominantly mobile now, although airlines are not. So the point of what I said was, this is not a cool technology that is for the domain of the nerds to adopt and do cool things with. This is literally for everyone in the company to change the nature of how they work, to change well, obviously the level of productivity is one thing, but it's bigger than that. It's really, you start not thinking about what are cool things I can do with Claude or OpenAI, anything like that. Is Would you start with is, okay, my brain is now leading 100 people that are the smartest people in the world, and they all just happen to be AI. They're not people. So how do I change the structure? How do I change the growth? How do I change product planning, product management, all of that stuff around the fact that individuals are far more powerful and independent now than they'd ever have been? And that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen in a company of 100 people where everyone's figuring that out themselves. It happens through leadership, and it happens through disruptive change in the organization itself. So a lot of people are still saying, in fact, most people are still saying AI is great for coding, and it is. AI.
or AI is good, or AI is good for productivity gains, or cost savings, right? But Bobby, what happens if your CEO or your leadership is not, you know, coming from a tech background? So, like they're not
Yeah.
digital first, they're not tech first, which a lot of the travel companies, the more established travel companies aren't.
Hmm.
So how do they sort of, how do they move the cheese then?
Yeah, I mean, I think the starting point is don't think about AI as a tech thing at all. It knows tech because it happens that tech is very objective, right? There's no room for interpretation with tech. It either you build code, it's a language, it works or it doesn't work. Deterministic. Whereas AI isn't. That is AI. Has read every book, right? It's every bit of literature, whatever. It knows it all, and it can make sense of it all together. So I think the first point is non-technical people need to understand that AI has nothing to do with tech. It's simply a thinking thing, and it can apply itself in any way you ask it to. That's the first point. And then the second point is if you're a middle manager in a big travel company, technology company, the way you should be thinking about it is you can just get a lot more done now. Not you, but the company can take on a lot more initiatives and expect to have a very, very fast turnaround in terms of minimum viable product or initial view of things. All of this iterative process of design, screens, workflow, coding, debugging, all of that stuff evaporates, and you should expect to be getting seriously good implementations of ideas that you have in weeks rather than months, and in with maybe one person producing it rather than an army and a big budget. So I think that's the first thing is expect a lot more from not from your people, but expect to be able to do a lot more quickly, and therefore a lot more cheaply. So, I think look at whatever product you have now and say, if it's a years old product and it's been out there for a long time, highly likely that you could have built that in about a tenth of the cost and a tenth of the time if you wanted to, if you had AI. So if that's the case, what's everyone else doing? Everyone else is licking their licks at the opportunity that they see to disrupt you and to compete with you and to produce something. And I always look at Booking.com as, or Expedia, either of them great companies that have really succeeded because of their ability to aggregate a long tail, translate a long tail, and scale that up. If I look at that, that was what I call that's the brute force advantage, right? It's the kind of early leader that uses brute force and capital and scale to be able to do that, to the point where the marginal difference between them and everyone else that tries to compete with them is so big that no one can compete with them, right? That's a great example of something that is not true anymore. So, you can use automation and AI now to build something that has just as good quality, just as many, hotels or cars or whatever your product is, but aggregate that long chain and make sense of that long chain for any language, that's spoken almost free of charge. Um, so, and I won't zoom in on, hey, let's all compete with Booking.com. The point is, all of the advantages that big technology or travel technology companies have are not as big a moat as they used to be. And you can let's put it this way: AI helps you swim across very wide moats.
Bobby, I had an interview recently with Brett Henry, who is the CEO of MG Group in Indonesia, based out of Indonesia, which is a hospitality bed bank, right? And when I asked him, because he deals with a lot of the small hotel companies, the smaller ones, the 2 to 3 star, long tail
Yeah,
hotels, and I asked him how should they be thinking about AI? I mean, his thought was, okay, if there are commercial tools that you can use, go ahead. But in terms
yeah,
of like thinking about AI in your architecture, forget it. He says, don't even go there, do nothing, just be fast followers. because there's no way
Yeah.
that a small company can compete with a giant. So but you're saying something else.
Oh
So
yeah, for sure.
just
So
want to.
so what I would say for the small guys like boutique hotels, small chains even, they just need to be AI friendly. And what I mean by that is they should expect to take a call from an AI agent to place a booking. And the AI agent will be asking them questions over the phone about their hotel, about their room, all sorts of details. And that'll be an AI agent calling them, building a database to be able to, make sense of that unstructured information, that subjective information, make sense of it for their customer, who is the person using the AI. Make their website AI friendly, and it's kind of almost, you remember being SEO friendly, right? Hotel companies had to be SEO friendly, so if people searched for blah blah hotel, they'd find blah blah hotel, and then Booking and Expedia just dominated that search anyway with Google, so killed all the small guys anyway. But I think that might be different with AI, where there isn't this single centralized uh, machine that has a million hotels in it and that's playing a pay for play, and then it's got this kind of paid search arbitrage with Google. I think that there's an opportunity here, and I would say almost a likelihood that that won't be repeated, and that actually fragmentation plays very well into the hands of AI, and then the business model. So fragmentation. I mean, obviously, the hotel industry is the most fragmented, and all you need to do to participate in that as a small hotelier is simply to be AI friendly. Where you have scale negotiating now with the big aggregators, the big bed banks that are looking for net rates and all of that stuff, and that's to their advantage. I actually think all of that can be flattened out and done in a completely different way now because of AIs. And to be honest with you, if I had to spare 7 days of the week, that's probably what I'd be building.
So I want to come back to the implementation, or thinking of AI not as a tech but as a thing that you actually breathe, live and breathe within the organization, right? And so give us maybe a couple of practical examples of how you had to sort of, I don't know whether you had the force feed that believe into the two startups that
Yeah.
you're running, which is Mana Drone
Yeah.
and Meili, right? Did you have to force feed that through your organization, and how did you get your team to just basically
Yeah.
think the same way and act that same way?
Well, so there's simple things that we do where, I personally champion it, at the start. I'm the big believer, and I'm a pretty pragmatic person. I don't believe in every latest, greatest thing. I do look for a bit of real and bit of, practicality from new technologies. So the starting point for me anyway is just a little bit of leadership, a little bit of, okay, this is good. We really need to lean into this. We really need to all understand this. And that's a starting point. And so kind of find other leaders, other ambassadors within the organization to kind of, be willing to embrace this, and then, spread the love, spread the message. Then the second part was also there's carrot and stick, obviously. And the other part of the carrot was we have a centralized place. We use Slack for communications, both companies, both Meili and Manna. And in there, we kind of celebrate those small wins. Look what I did with AI. Here's an example of stuff that I did. And that kind of, the best way to learn about it, using a new tool, is from people that are already using that tool. And so that's a good way of kind of opening eyes to, people that might underestimate what the AI can do. Then they'll learn from people that push the frontier a little bit on that. And so that was a good way for the early days of saying, holy cow, look at this. Like one guy in Manna, we had this bit of code on our drones that stream video signal to a remote pilot. And that's really complex code. It's really difficult to get it right and reliable and all that stuff. And he'd been writing that code for over a year. And there was always issues with it, but it was fine. But there was always issues. And one day he just, embraced it and said, let the AI have a go at writing this. And the AI wrote the code, and it worked first time, and it's never failed us since. And that's an example of it's a great, the thing is, he should have figured that out earlier, that the AI could have done that, rather than knock his head against the wall trying to fix it himself. But at the same time, unless you've done something like that with AI, you don't really know how good it's going to be. So celebrate those little victories and let everyone know about them. It's a great way of bringing everybody up a little bit. And then the stick part is, and I call it Claude shaming. We use Anthropic and Claude mostly, and it's Claude shaming. If someone asks me a question, I invariably answer it with Claude. I screenshot it and then I Claude shame them in front of the whole company. And I think recently I did that with our CTO Alan, who's brilliant by the way, and believes in Claude just as much as me, and kind of briefly forgot and asked me for the way around some part of our database. He needed to know something. And the thing is, we've already educated Claude on our entire data model, all of our source code, all of our modules. There's documents and documents that we have that describe our database and how to make sense of our data. And Claude knows all that now. And you can ask Claude anything now. If you're a new programmer in Manna or in Meili, you can come in not knowing anything and say, hey, how do I get to the customer database for Meili, for airline X or whatever? And it knows. So like it's a progression, but the progression can be various speeds, and those speeds are determined culturally by the people that are in the company, not just leading it like me, but also the rest of them, their willingness to embrace it and try out things. And that is easy to do in a small company and next to impossible to do in a large company. If I give one example,
Exactly.
can I give another example? Because a lot of companies listening to this will have heard of Intercom. Intercom is a company that do customer communications for, I'll oversimplify it, they'll hate me for it, but we use Intercom for, customer chat, customer email, tracking, that kind of stuff. And Intercom, literally when OpenAI, ChatGPT, Claude produced APIs, Intercom were the first company that I saw. First of all, they were the most threatened by AI because everyone says, well, you don't need chatbots anymore because they're going to be done by AI. And their bread and butter was that. And they were out after a few months with an AI powered chatbot called Finn that literally made them the leaders in AI in that space. And suddenly they took a lead by embracing inverted commas the threat of AI. And they're a big company, established, like very large Silicon Valley company. So I think they pulled it off. But I also see, other companies in our industry in travel tech that are, celebrating AI by appointing a small little team of people over here in the far corner to play with AI for a while and do an occasional press release about, hey, look, we enabled, searching of reviews by an AI bot, and they think that box ticked, and that's a mistake, right? This is not a box ticking exercise. This is a re-architecture exercise of your organization and your product to take advantage of it. And if you don't, somebody else will. So beautiful time to be alive for investors and startups.
Fantastic. So to your coder who really realized that that AI could write his code in matter of minutes versus the year that it took, right? How did he respond to that? Did he sort of start to say, well, what about my job? Like, what's my
He
value?
was
So
delighted.
how do you handle that
He was
personal?
delighted. He'll be listening to this. His name is Flan, and I think it's a great example. He was delighted. There was just a little bit of friction between him, getting stuck in the code, trying to fix what he had forever, and saying, "Hey, maybe the AI can just do this for me." And to be honest with you, we were all a little. It was at the time when he did it, we were all a little bit surprised of how good the AI was. It just nailed it first time. Um, and no, he was very positive about it, to be honest with you. I've seen a handful of people that work for me that are bloody stubborn on it, and they come up with all sorts of reasons and excuses why AI is like there's issues. And yeah, I understand that too. That's definitely who moved my cheese coming up there. And it's usually it stems from like I'm a programmer for 35 years. I've been writing code and getting better and better my whole life. And now suddenly that's devalued massively. It's almost like a currency devaluation. Suddenly your amazing skill that you're, the best programmer since sliced bread, all that stuff gone. It's gone. Doesn't matter. All my programming experience is worth nothing now. And that's that's difficult for people, I guess, to accept. And some of them choose to stay in the art of, being in the engine room with grease on their hands and oily faces and stuff. But it's not viable. But there's people like that for sure. And then the big excuse, like AI is its own worst enemy because there's been a lot of bad communications around it, particularly data privacy, data ownership, all those things. And those clouds or those murky areas are sometimes referenced by people that are begrudgingly going forward with AI, and they say, "Oh, well, our data, you can't put any private data up there, blah, blah, blah." You can. And if you don't, somebody else will. And truth is, there's no real, like a lot of this data that people are afraid of putting onto AIs, it's not actually valuable. It's the organization and the process and all of those other things that come with a company that are, the
Yeah, but Bobby, it's very human, right? Like you say, if you've been studying 35 years, or me as a journalist, where I've spent my life honing my craft to write
yeah,
and to do interviews, and then suddenly you can generate podcasts in a matter
yeah,
of 10 5 minutes, right?
correct.
And all the and then you go, wow, what was that all about? What was my life all about,
Yeah.
right? So on a human level, how do you tell people, your team, to deal with it? And if there are individuals who can't deal with it, what happens? Do you fire
Well, I
them?
think nostalgia is a feeling of both happiness and sadness, right? And if you look back at all the great, you know, piece of journalism you've been involved in, and you look forward and you say, if you were growing up now, that's not going to happen, right? You're going to use AI to do a lot of this, and even the people reading it, like people are even consuming information completely radically differently as well. So, I mean, I think it's up to the individual. Personally, for my companies that I'm involved in, for the opportunities for everybody else, like a young Bobby Healy now, if he was starting a company, um, I think it's a much better place to be than the young Bobby Healy that started a company in 1988. Uh, so no, there's no
Yeah.
reason. I can't see any reason whatsoever to feel worried or negative about the future with AI. It's all upside.
So to summarize, one game changing moment in AI,
Yeah,
right? With a lot of assumptions being challenged right
yeah,
now. Two, don't think of AI as a tech, but as a life
yeah,
force. Three, appoint a champion or have leaders that really, embrace that and lead the
yeah.
way, right? And then encourage your team to play with it, experiment with it, and then celebrate it. Shame them if you have to, but motivate them, and I guess celebrate the inner qualities that make you who you are, right? Because now you can use those qualities to really achieve much more powerful
Yeah.
outcomes.
Yeah.
In as you say, at like 5% of the cost, or at the
Yeah.
speed that you would never have imagined before. So a beautiful time, I think, a beautiful time to be in travel tech. But you and I are optimists.
I mean, at the end of the day, what are we involved in? We're actors in this ecosystem that essentially lets people have great experiences in their life, and that's what life is about.